Good afternoon, everyone. Jake, great to see you.
One of the president's highest priorities, not just since Evan was taken, but even before Evan was taken, when Paul Whelan, was in prison and has been for 5.5 years, stretching back to the previous administration, has been to get all of our American citizens home, not just from Russia, but from countries around the world. And the record of this administration, I have to say, is quite remarkable. You had Roger Carstens out here a couple of days ago at the forum. Close to 50 Americans that we have brought home, either hostages or unjustly detained people, and we have done that through difficult decisions, through hard diplomacy, and through the president making this a relentless priority. And that goes for Evan Gershkovich, and uniquely in his case, because, as you said, he has been taken into prison and convicted for the crime of committing journalism, for something that we care passionately about in this country. This is something the president will not rest until we get him home. To your specific question, we are going to make every effort we can to get to the point where Russia agrees to release Evan and Paul, that we get them home and we get them home safe. And we would like to see that happen today or tomorrow or the next day, but I can't handicap right now, sitting here on stage, what is likely to happen or what the psychology of the Russian mind is on the question of the conviction and how it plays into any negotiations. All I can tell you is we are laser focused on this. We are determined to make it happen, and I will consider it one of the most important things between now and the end of the year, and especially now and the end of the month, for us to try to get something done where we can get him home.
Thank you.
The National Press Club has been working with the Wall Street Journal and others to try and bring attention to Evan's case and get him home right from the start. And today we are horrified, we're upset, we're frustrated, but I don't think we're shocked. I think we have a very clear understanding of why Russia has arrested Evan, and it has nothing to do with journalism, which he was in the country legally permitted to do, right? He had to submit the paperwork, Russia had to review it, they had to approve him to be a reporter there. And they could have expelled him or removed that permission, but instead they chose to arrest him. And I think that that speaks very clearly as to what Russia's true motives are here. The fact that we had a trial where we're not seeing any evidence, because we know there is no evidence. We know that this trial is a sham. And while we are very concerned about hearing the sentence today of 16 years, we are really calling on the U.S. government to continue to do absolutely everything they can to get Evan home. Evan is a journalist. Journalism is not a crime. We know there are a lot of individuals within the U.S. government who are working very hard to get Evan home. All I would say is that I hope today is fuel for the fire. And I hope that today doubles down efforts from the U.S. as well as our allies to do everything they can to get an innocent American back home with his family. Well, of course, also Kurmasheva, who is an American journalist. She's a mom of two. She's a wife, lived in Prague, was just visiting her mom in Russia, wasn't even living there or even reporting there. And she as well has been captured and unfairly and unjustly detained. And so we do have a lot of concern about what Evan's sentence could mean for her. And of course, for the National Press Club, we do tend to focus a lot on American journalists who are being detained overseas. But certainly, we are very cognizant that a lot of our partners partners in the press freedom space are working with many, many, many more journalists who are being detained wrongfully in a number of countries, not because they did anything wrong, but just because they were doing their job, that critical job of reporting and telling the news and keeping individuals informed. And so I think it's a very concerning sign as to what Russia has done today, as to how far they've been able to get in this process, and the fact that it just seems like they are, completely fine, not putting forward any evidence, completely fine with a sham trial. There's no sense of justice here. There's no sense of righteousness. And I think that is deeply concerning to a lot of us, to all of us, really. I think in the journalism industry and anyone who is impacted by the journalism industry, which I would argue should be everyone, really.
Yeah, because you can't get an office locked.
I mean, the general public hasn't been able to read any of Evan's reporting for more than a year now. And this is about a war that the U.S. is very much involved in, that there is a very real political debate in this country right now about how much we should or should not be helping Ukraine. And the fact of the matter is that our elected officials, they hear from voters. They are doing a temperature check of where their constituents stand. And if their constituents don't really know the true story of what's happening, if they don't have all the details, and they don't because they don't have Evan there reporting on them, then how are the American public supposed to make good decisions? How are our lawmakers supposed to have a clear understanding of what role the U.S. does or doesn't need to play at this point? I mean, for the National Press Club, we try and stay out of the politics stuff. We want to be very clear, though, that we think any debate is greatly helped by additional information, and that comes from the good reporting, like the reporting that Evan was doing, and that we hope he will do again someday soon.
Evan Gershkovich of the Wall Street Journal, who was sentenced this morning to 16 years in prison. Also, Vladimir Karamurza, who was awarded the Pulitzer Prize this year for his columns for the Washington Post. How do we bring them home?
And of course, when it comes to Evan, when it comes to Paul Whelan in Russia, other Americans, we're working it quite literally every day, looking to see what we can do to get them home. We've had a rather extraordinary track record over the last 3.5 years of doing just that, bringing some 30 Americans home from different places around the world where they were being unjustly detained. All I can tell you is this, we're working it. We're working it as we speak, and we're not going to stop until we get Evan home, get Paul Whelan home, until we get others home.
Understanding and appreciating that you would not want to get into any details in a public forum of negotiations that may be underway.
Any effort to bring any American home is going to be part of a process of back and forth, of discussion, potentially of negotiation. And depending on what the other side is looking for, they'll reach their own conclusions about whether it meets whatever their needs are, and we can bring someone home. And I don't think that's dependent on an election in the United States or anywhere else.
Okay. You talked about how Russia, in your view, has already lost, that they're facing a bigger, stronger NATO than 3 years ago.
A Russian court has ruled that Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was on trial for espionage, will face 16 years behind bars. Russia accused him of collecting secret information for the US CIA. He denies any wrongdoing, as does the paper he works for. Here's what you need to know. Gershkovich had reported on Russia for more than 5 years before his arrest. He's a fluent Russian speaker, an American born to Soviet émigrés and raised in New Jersey. Gershkovich moved to the Russian capital in late 2017 to join the English-language Moscow Times. He also worked for the French news agency Agence France-Presse and joined the Wall Street Journal just before Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. On March 29, 2023, on a trip to the industrial city of Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains, Gershkovich was detained by the Federal Security Service, or FSB, in a steakhouse. The FSB says he was trying to gather secrets on a Russian defence enterprise, which is one of the world's biggest battle tank producers, about 880 miles east of Moscow. The White House condemned the arrest almost immediately in March of 2023.
These espionage charges are ridiculous. We condemn the detention of Mr. Gershkovich in the strongest terms.
US President Joe Biden has called his detention, quote, totally illegal. Gershkovich is the first American journalist to be detained on spy charges in Russia since the Cold War. The FSB said it caught him, quote, red-handed, trying to obtain military secrets. Russian prosecutors say Gershkovich carried out the illegal actions using, quote, painstaking conspiratorial methods. They did not release any documentary evidence to back up the charge. The Wall Street Journal says Gershkovich was on a reporting assignment and has said the accusations are based on lies. He has always maintained the denial that he's a spy and has consistently demanded his release. The trial, which Gershkovich's employer branded a, quote, sham, took place behind closed doors. US diplomats say that Gershkovich was not a spy and that he was detained by the FSB to build up a store of arrested US citizens, who could later be swapped for Russians detained in the West. Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested that a prisoner swap for Gershkovich could be possible, but said such negotiations should be held away from the media.
Руководствуясь статьями 307, 308, 309 Уголовно-процессуального кодекса Российской Федерации, суд приговорил Гершковича Эвана признать виновным в совершении преступления, предусмотренного статьей 276 Уголовного кодекса Российской Федерации, и назначенным наказание в виде лишения свободы на срок 16 лет с отбыванием в исправительной колонии строгого режима. Приговор понятен. Назначенное наказание, сроки, порядок обжалования приговора. Напоминаю вам о том, что в течение 5 дней вам будет вручен полный текст приговора. Сейчас была оглашена только вводно-результативная часть его. Кроме этого, напоминаю вам о том, что имеете право ознакомиться с протоколом судебного заседания и подать на него свои замечания в случае несогласия. У вас есть какие-то вопросы по приговору? Нет. Все, судебное заседание окончено.
В суде достоверно установлено и документально подтверждено, что американский журналист газеты The Wall Street Journal Gershkovich по заданию ЦРУ в марте 2023 года в Свердловской области собирал секретную информацию о деятельности оборонного предприятия АО НПК «Уралвагонзавод» по выпуску и ремонту военной техники.